Good morning.
Good morning.
Pastor Eric, Danielle, welcome back to King Street Kids Q&A. Are you ready for more questions?
Let's do it.
All right. So our first question. We talk a lot about God and what is God like. Our next question is pretty interesting. It's what does God's voice sound like?
Easy, Morgan Freeman.
Oh,
Morgan Freeman.
Morgan
And
Freeman.
that's what one of our yams said that yesterday. One of our yams said that's what they pictured. Morgan Freeman's voice. Yeah, it's a very deep voice. Very good. Okay, what else?
Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel Jackson.
All right, Samuel L.
All these
Jackson.
men. Gosh.
I know. Does God's voice sound like? Is it a man's voice?
So I had I heard of an interesting interpretation once. If you've ever seen the movie The Prince of Egypt, it's a really good movie. It's a little scary at the end, but it's okay. When they got to any of the parts where there was music, where there was singing, and it was God saying something in the song, those parts were sung by the entire cast. So on the songs, there wasn't one voice for the voice of God. It was everybody's. So.
I wonder if God's voice is a human voice. I mean, is a thing around us. We were with the yams last night for the gathering, for the yam gathering, socially, and we were at the beach, and the waves were really strong and crashing. And could it be that God's voice sometimes comes in the sound of crashing waves or roaring wind? Or crackling fire, or singing birds, or barking dogs in creation? It could be.
I think so. And we also read about, last week in the Bible story, in the Old Testament story, we read about God's voice being in silence. Or was it 2 weeks ago? God's voice being in silence.
I think it was 2 weeks ago, you're right.
Silence. Yeah.
So our last week, our question was, how do we know God's calling us? Well, we have to be listening, and sometimes it's maybe not even a voice at all. Maybe it's God's voice is through action. Sometimes we have to listen not with our ears, but we listen with our hearts and in using our other senses.
Our second question: why do we have a pulpit in church? Why do we use a pulpit in church?
You want to take this one, Pastor?
So the question, or the kind of practical reason is back before, way before we had sound systems and microphones that could amplify our voices, and, make it so everybody could hear us. The pulpit was really useful for helping the sound from the person's voice move outward. And so if you're up a little bit higher than the crowd and we have a soundboard that comes down above us, if you have that in place, it helps the sound of your voice travel farther over a crowd.
Yeah, to be seen and heard.
Yeah.
We have a special one at our church. It's a special wine cup, goblet. It's,
Third question, interesting one here. What is what's the most interesting gift that you've ever received?
The one that comes to my mind is Christmas of 1979. I have twin brothers, and they were born on a Friday morning, and they came home from the hospital on Tuesday morning, the following Tuesday morning, which was Christmas morning. So I remember that so clearly. I was 6.5 years old, and they came home on Christmas morning, and that was I've always thought that was sort of a neat Christmas gift.
Let me guess, you looked at your parents and said, "That's not the dog I wanted."
I know. It was I was sort of disappointed at that point because it meant it was not about me that Christmas. But it worked out okay in the end.
You got twins for Christmas.
It was good.
What about you, Daniel?
I don't know. I'm like torn on how do I take this. I think the interesting and it's like interesting and odd and gift because it was more like a joke. But when I lived in Malaysia, my friends, we went to I think Malacca, and we went on like a food tour, and they gave me smelly tofu. Um, and I was like 2 weeks in the country, I think, at this point. And it tasted so bad, and they just laughed. I thought I was gonna throw up in the street, and all they did was laugh at me. It was awful, but it was funny.
I think for me, it's actually it's over my shoulder. It's in the shot a lot. It's actually a manger scene. It's a nativity set, um, and it's a little mismatched, but it's a nativity set that I got from my great grandmother's house. After she died, we were cleaning out her house, and I got it from my uncle. He gave it to me. He now lives in her house, and it's interesting because if you look at the bottom of the figures, it's some of them say made in West Germany. And so it comes from a time when Germany was still split in half. And so it's kind of historical. It's a family gift. Well, thanks guys for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So we are looking for questions. Our question list is running a little low right now, actually. So if you have questions, send them to Daniel and send them to his email, and we will do our very best to answer them. And we certainly look forward to getting some questions.
Y'all have a great week.
You
We'll
too.
see everybody next.
All right.
Be well.